My granddaughter came through the kitchen door with her coat half off, and the March slush still melting in her hair, and the first words out of her mouth were that a dead man was breathing. I should have dropped to my knees right there on the linoleum and thanked God. Instead, my hands went cold around the dish towel, and I had to lower myself into the kitchen chair, because for 11 months, I had been the one lying to her. And I knew. The way you know a storm is coming before the first drop hits the glass. That whatever she'd found in that county hospital was about to dig up the thing I'd buried. You live long enough, you learn that the heaviest things a person carries are the ones nobody can see. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how a dead man ended up breathing under a hospital sheet, and how an old woman like me came to lie to the one person she loved most in this world, you have to go back a ways. Back to a green spring afternoon, before any of the grief, when my Lily came up the porch steps with her teaching diploma held out in front of her like a bouquet. Grandma. She was grinning so wide I could count her back teeth. Aren't you going to congratulate me? You are looking at an official, certified first-grade teacher. I dried my hands and took that blue folder from her like it was spun glass. I turned it over once, twice. My eyes filled before I could do a thing about it. There's my girl, I said. And then, because I am an old fool who has never once known how to leave a good moment alone, Lord, if only your mama and daddy had lived to see this. The light dimmed in her face for half a second, and I could have bitten my own tongue clean through. Her daddy was my boy. He loved that lake more than was good for him, and he'd talked his wife into loving it too. They'd drive out before sunup and leave Lily with me, asleep in the back bedroom under the quilt I'd made the winter she was born. That last morning I stood at the screen door in my nightgown and begged him not to go. The ice was going rotten. You could hear it that time of year, a long groaning out on the water, like the lake itself was warning anyone with sense to stay off it. The thaw's coming, I told him. Ice'll give. If you won't think of yourselves, think of that baby. What's she supposed to do? Orphaned at 15? He kissed my cheek and laughed me off the way grown sons do. Don't fuss, Ma. We'll bring you a stringer of perch, and you'll fry us a pie. They never came home. They found them a month later, when the lake gave back what it had taken. Lily was 15, nobody so much as breathed the word foster home. She was mine. She'd always been mine, and I just went on keeping her. They'd never managed a house of their own, my boy and his wife. Young people never think there'll be a shortage of time. There always is. So you see why a diploma made me weep into my apron. I had raised that child through the worst thing that can happen to a person, and here she stood, certified, whole, smiling. I've got the job already, she said, helping herself to the pie before I'd even cut it. First grade, over at the elementary 2 blocks from here. I'm scared half to death. You'll do fine. You always say that, because it's always been true. She didn't tell me, that afternoon, that she'd met a man. She was a careful girl. Why get an old woman's hopes up over something that might come to nothing? But I knew the look. A woman doesn't smile down into a coffee cup like that over the price of butter. It started, she told me much later, in the checkout line at the grocery. There was an old woman ahead of her, shaking the last of her coins out of a knotted handkerchief, counting nickels onto the belt with hands that trembled. The girl at the register, all of 19 and rolling her eyes, snapped at her. Were you panhandling on a corner for these? Should have stayed home and not bred more strays. The old woman ducked her head and said, so soft you could barely hear it. That payday was 2 days off, and her cat had just had kittens. Don't take anything off, my Lily said. She'd never been able to stand a bully, not since the schoolyard. Ring up 20 cans of cat food besides. I'm paying. The cashier smirked but did it. And my Lily looked her dead in the eye and told her a little kindness toward people. Wouldn't cost her a thing. That, it turned out, was when he noticed her. He'd been standing back by the carts, a tall man holding the old woman's grocery sack in one hand and steadying her elbow with the other. He told Lily, with a grin he couldn't quite hide, that he was the woman's ride home. that thanks to her generosity the poor thing now had a sack she couldn't lift. Lily, mortified, hadn't thought of that. So she rode along. They carried the bags up, admired the kittens, scratched the mama cat behind the ears, and turned down the offer of tea. And as they were leaving, Lily caught him slip a folded bill, a big one, into the old woman's coat pocket, quiet, like he didn't want us soul to see. "You always do that?" Lily teased him on the sidewalk. "Got to win back some standing," he said. "You've made me look like an amateur in there." He stuck out his hand. Daniel Garrett. "Money has a way of stripping the paint off a person, showing you the wood underneath. Most of the time you don't like what you find. With Daniel, the more I learned, the more I trusted the grain." He was 32. He'd built himself a little bakery and a handful of corner shops, the kind always crowded at the cinnamon roll hour. He'd lost both his folks inside a single year. They went one right after the other, the way old married people sometimes do, like they can't manage the road apart. He had one sister, Erica, married off to a foreigner and living an ocean away. And he'd learned to bake at his own grandmother's elbow. "She was something," he told Lily, "taught me every trick she knew. My own mother never could touch her bread." He said it with a wink, daring her to doubt him. "A man can claim anything," Lily said. "I'd want proof." He took her to the bakery that very evening. She told me the smell hit her at the door, and her mouth watered like a child's. He vanished into the back and came out with a roll, golden and steaming, and held it out. She shut her eyes, breathed it in, and ate the whole thing so fast they both stood there blinking at her empty hands. "All right," she admitted, Scarlett. "You're telling the truth." After that, he started meeting her outside the school. And one Sunday she finally brought him to me. I'd been bracing for trouble. I am a suspicious old thing, and a man with money courting a young teacher with none. I'd seen how those stories tend to go, but I watched him at my table. I watched how he listened when I rattled on, how he ate 2 helpings and meant it, how his eyes went soft and far away when I mentioned his grandmother's bread. There was a little birthmark on him, just below his right ear. Shaped, I always thought, like a leaf. I noticed it that first Sunday because he had a way of tilting his head when he laughed. Remember that mark. It matters later, more than you'd believe. When he'd driven off, Lily turned to me, anxious as a girl waiting on a grade. "Well?" "He's older than me, I know, 32. I waved a hand, a pup, wet behind the ears. But I took hers and squeezed it. "Steady, though. He won't hurt you, that one. I can see it. You've got my blessing, child, for whatever an old woman's blessing is worth." She moved in with him a month later. A brand new place, 3 bedrooms, fresh paint, the kind of home my boy never lived to give his own wife. And that, God forgive me, was when the loneliness started gnawing on me. After enough years, an empty house stops feeling temporary and starts feeling like the rest of your life. I didn't say a word to her. You don't hang your weight on a young person, just spreading her wings. But the silence in those rooms got into my bones, and I'd find myself talking to the cat just to hear a voice. 3 months on, she came by glowing and told me she was expecting. Daniel wanted to marry right away. Wanted it before the baby came. Wanted his name on every paper there was. But Lily was sick the whole way through. Swollen ankles, dragging herself home from the school, in no shape to stand up at a courthouse. They settled on a quiet thing after the birth. A month before her time, he drove her down to the county clerk all the same, and they filed the paperwork, left the date blank. "You don't need a ceremony," the clerk said. "Come sign between somebody else's, any day you like." She had a girl. They named her Sadie, the 2 of them, before she was even born. And Daniel, they let him into the room somehow, against all the rules. Daniel held that baby like she was made of light. Counted her fingers. Watched Lily nurse her with his hand pressed over his own mouth. "God help me," he said, "but I love the both of you more than I know what to do with." 2 days later, on the morning she was to bring the baby home, his phone went to a recording, then to nothing at all. He never came to the hospital. She called a cab. The apartment was dark and empty. She stood in the doorway of that beautiful 3-bedroom place, holding a newborn, and felt the floor open under her. She called me. Could she come home, she asked. Her and the baby, just till he turned up. Surely there was an explanation. Surely. Lily, honey, I said, and I'm ashamed now how my heart leapt under the worry. You come right home. You come home this minute. She moved the crib and the stroller out of his apartment that same day, and the house that had gone so quiet was suddenly full again. A baby crying at 2 in the morning, diapers on the line, my Lily and my great-grand under my roof. I told myself I was only being a comfort. I told myself a lot of things. We'd decided she'd go to the police in the morning. A man doesn't just vanish without a word. Not a good man, not Daniel. That evening we sat in my front room with the local news murmuring and the baby asleep down the hall. And then the woman on the screen folded her hands and said, there was one last, sad item. A burned-out car had been found on the old fairgrounds outside town. Inside it, a body. The vehicle belonged to a local businessman, Daniel Garrett, owner of the bakery half the county loved. His own people had identified what was left of his clothes and his boots. The early finding was a fire that started on its own, the man unable to get free of the locked doors. An investigation was ongoing. His only family, a sister overseas, had been notified. Then the broadcast moved on to the weather. My Lily did not move. She sat staring at that screen long after it had gone to a commercial for laundry soap, and when she finally turned to me, her lips were shaking. Tell me it's not true, she whispered. Grandma, tell me they're wrong. I didn't have a single word in me. I pulled her in and held her against my chest and felt her come apart. And all I could do was rock her like I had when she was 15, and the lake gave my boy back. I'm here, baby, I said into her hair. I'm here. The funeral hall was packed. The whole town came, his bakery girls, his shop clerks, his suppliers, old men who'd bought the same loaf off him every morning for years. They buried him in a closed box. There was nothing left to see. His sister ran the whole show. Erica had flown in the moment they called, and she stood at the head of that room in a coat that cost more than I see in a season, receiving people like a queen. Lily hung back by the wall, afraid to go near the casket. When she finally did, she broke, and Erica saw her crying over a man she'd never laid eyes on, and came over with her mouth set hard. And who are you? We were going to be married, Lily managed. When the baby was born, I've had his daughter. Erica's smile was a thin, cold thing. Is that so? He never mentioned a word of it to me. And when, exactly, was I to be invited to this wedding? We weren't going to make a fuss. We were just going to sign. Don't you spin that for me? The voice dropped to a hiss so the mourners wouldn't hear. I've seen your kind, showing up the second there's money on the table. Well, I'm his only blood, and I'll see to it you get nothing. She held up one manicured hand in a gesture so ugly I won't describe it. Not a dime. Now get out and stay out, or you'll wish you had. Lily fled. She ran the whole way to the bus, smearing tears across her face with the back of her hand, and she fell into my arms at the door, still asking the same broken question. Grandma, why would she say that? I just wanted to say goodbye to him. I don't want a thing from them. I don't want anything. And here is where I sinned, and where I'll be honest with you the way I couldn't be honest with her. Because she was wrong. There was something. Daniel had come to me, weeks before the baby, with a folder of papers and a grin like a boy, hiding a present. He'd put that 3-bedroom apartment in Lily's name. Hers and the baby's, free and clear. He wanted it to be a surprise the day she came home from the hospital. Don't say anything, Miss Ruth, he'd said. Let me see her face. He left the deed with me for safekeeping. It was in my cupboard the whole time, folded behind the good china. When I heard him say, "Get out, you'll get nothing," I should have stood up in that funeral hall and said, "She already has it." He gave it to her himself. I didn't. I kept my mouth shut. And I told myself I was protecting her from a fight. But that was a lie I told myself to cover a worse truth. If she had that apartment, she'd take the baby and go live in it. And I'd be alone again, rattling around my house talking to the cat, an old woman waiting on Sunday visits. So I let her believe there was nothing. I let my own granddaughter scrub by on a teacher's leave pay and my pension, 3 of us under one roof, rather than risk the silence coming back. Some sins don't roar. They just sit quiet in a cupboard behind the china and wait. The months ground on, all of them the same. Sadie grew. She got fat and laughing, and started hauling herself up on the furniture. And me, I'll confess it, I came back to life. There's no medicine, like a baby in the house. I'd been fading. Suddenly I had a reason to get up. Folks said I looked 10 years younger, but the truth I'd hidden sat in my chest like a swallowed stone. A dozen times I started to tell her. A dozen times I lost my nerve. When Sadie turned 1, Lily wanted to go back to work. The school couldn't take her on half days. No such position. They said come back full-time after the leave. She sat on a bench outside that building afterward, doing sums in her head. A growing child, an aging grandmother, a teacher's pittance, and a pension stretched over 3 mouths. And no work. How do we live? A woman sat down beside her, Carol, the mother of one of her old students. Lily was so frazzled she'd forgotten the name and spent the whole evening digging through her records to find it, mortified. But Carol didn't stand on ceremony. She listened to Lily's troubles, and then she said the hospital where she worked needed an aide on the trauma floor. Part-time, no degree required. I can't. Lily said, I've no medical training. Honey, who needs it? Can you mop a floor? Empty a bedpan? Wash down a patient who can't wash himself? That's the job, and ours pays better than the other wards. The night shifts pay double. Then yes, Lily said, yes please. She came home and asked, careful, if I could keep Sadie while she worked, even the odd night. Of course I can, I said, a touch insulted. I'm not a doddering wreck yet. And I meant it. Truth be told, I was glad of it. Another reason to stay needed. The work was brutal at first. She'd mop with bleach till her eyes burned, clean up what sick bodies leave behind, turn patients twice her size, strip and remake beds for the worst cases. Those first weeks she'd come home, kiss the baby, eat a bite standing up and fall into bed like a dropped stone. But some inner clock would shake her awake 2 hours later, and she'd come out to me with black circles under her eyes and never once complain. There was an old fellow on her shift, Gus, who dragged one leg and had no patience for self-pity. A man's a beast, he liked to say. Gets used to anything. The good things he gets used to fastest of all. He was right. Half a year in, the work didn't break her anymore. Her hands had toughened, the bleach didn't sting, and the worst messes didn't turn her stomach. Sadie was toddling and trying out words. I was humming around the kitchen, again, and then one ordinary evening a nurse stuck her head into the break room where Lily was resting after a long shift. They brought a vagrant up to 7, she said, wrinkling her nose. Found him in a ditch somewhere, beat half to death. Just, don't breathe through your nose when you clean him up. Lily had washed 100 such men. She gathered her things and went. She told me she knew before she'd wiped the first grime from his face. Something in the shape of him. And then she cleaned along his jaw, up toward his right ear, and there it was. A little birthmark, shaped like a leaf. She said his name out loud and the room tilted and went dark, and the next thing she knew the nurse was waving a packet of smelling salts under her nose. Lord, do you know him? The nurse asked. I have to be sure, Lily said, and she went back and washed that broken man as gently as if he were made of china. And out from under the dirt came the face of the man they had buried 11 months before. Broken ribs, bruises over every inch of him. A vagrant, they'd called him. Beaten by other rough men at the train depot when he'd tried to bed down there for the night. She leaned close. Daniel, can you hear me? It's Lily. He dragged his eyes open. They found her face and held there, but there was nothing in them. No recognition. Just a stranger's politeness. Do I know you? He rasped. The floor of the world fell out from under her a second time. Who then? Did we bury? When the doctor came, she grabbed his sleeve. This is Daniel Garrett. The businessman, the bakery. Garrett burned to death in his car, he said. I saw it on the news, same as you. It's him. I'd swear to it. We have a daughter. She didn't flinch. Run a DNA test. I'll bring my child's swab on my next shift. He looked at her a long moment, then gave the order to take the man down for scans. That is the moment my Lily came tearing through my kitchen door with the slush in her hair, shouting that a dead man was breathing. And that is the moment I finally told the truth. I sat her down at the table and took her hands. My voice came out small. I've done you a wrong, child. 11 months ago, before any of this. I made myself say it. Daniel put that apartment in your name. Yours and Sadie's. He came to me with the deed. Wanted to surprise you the day you came home. It's been in my cupboard the whole time, behind the good plates. And when we thought he was gone, and that sister of his stood there telling you you'd get nothing, I held my tongue. Because I was afraid. Afraid you'd move into that big place and leave me here alone. I'm an old, selfish thing, and I let you struggle when you didn't have to. I'm sorry, Lord, I'm sorry. I waited for her to be angry. I'd have deserved every word. Instead, she sat very still, working it over. Then she looked from my hands, twisting that apron up to my face, and she smiled. Grandma, she said softly, you did exactly right. Don't. No, listen. If we'd moved into that apartment, I'd never have gone looking for work. I'd never have taken that hospital job. And I'd never have walked into room 7 and found him. She pressed my old hands flat between her two strong young ones. Everything happens the way it's meant to. Don't you dare carry this one more day, you stubborn old woman. And I put my face down in my apron and cried out 11 months of fear all at once, and she rubbed my back the way I'd rubbed hers. And somewhere down the hall, the baby stirred and called for us both. The doctor's tests told the rest of the story, piece by terrible piece. The man in the bed had more wrong with him than broken ribs. There was an old, healed skull fracture, months old, and the marks of a beating that should have killed him. Working the phones, the doctor turned up a clinic across the county that, around the time Daniel vanished, had taken in a half-naked young man with a cracked skull, broken collarbone and ruined kidneys, found in a roadside ditch by a driver who'd pulled over to buy a potted cactus to give his wife the day their divorce came through. The man had no papers, only a stranger's cheap sweatpants yanked over his expensive underthings. He'd woken with no memory at all, so no one ever thought to connect him to a missing baker. That baker, after all, had been found burned in his own car. They patched him up, gave him donated clothes, and turned him loose into the world with no name. Retrograde amnesia, the doctor told us. The memory might come back. It might not. I'll take him home, Lily said, and there was no arguing it. The minute he can travel. They reopened the case. They dug up the grave. The DNA was plain. The burned man was not Daniel Garrett at all. It was one Gary Rourke, a local good-for-nothing, who'd dropped out of sight that very week. His running buddy, a fellow called Cody, had been telling everyone Gary lit out for work somewhere. When the law leaned on Cody, he came apart and spilled all of it. The two of them had been high, looking for trouble, when they spotted Daniel's car idling at the curb outside a flower shop. Engine running, keys in it, Daniel had ducked in for a bouquet. Cody slid behind the wheel and Gary jumped in beside him, and they peeled out. Daniel came running with his flowers and caught the passenger door, and Gary slammed it on him so hard he went down, crown of his head, cracking against the curb. They stopped, saw the fine watch, the good coat. They stripped him in the street, beat him until he stopped moving, dragged Gary's filthy sweatpants onto him, and rolled him into the ditch. That's where the cactus man found him. Then they drove out to the old fairgrounds to wear off the high. Cody found a gas can in the trunk, doused the car inside and out, and struck a match. But Gary had remembered the phone and the cash still in the seats and bolted back in to grab them. The door jammed, Cody ran, and Gary burned with the car, dressed in Daniel's clothes and Daniel's boots. The bakery folks identified those boots through their grief, and nobody looked any closer. Why would they? You don't run tests on a man you've already buried in your heart. I'll tell you one more thing, and then I'll let it lie. When Erica learned her brother was alive, she came back. I expected her to arrive swinging, lawyers, threats, that ugly hand of hers. She walked into that hospital corridor in her expensive coat.